The 2026 FIFA World Cup was meant to be the United States' defining moment on the global stage, the grandest sporting spectacle ever assembled in human history. 104 matches, 48 nations, 16 cities spread across 3 countries, and the United States positioned at the very center of it all. 78 games on American soil, every knockout match from the quarterfinals onward, and the World Cup final itself landing at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey. This was supposed to be transformational. This was supposed to be a $30 billion economic detonation, 185,000 new jobs, hotel rooms sold out across entire metropolitan areas, international airports flooded with visitors from every corner of the planet, and billions of dollars cascading into restaurants, retail outlets, transportation networks, and entertainment venues from coast to coast. That was the vision. That was the promise that was made to American cities, American workers, and the American economy. And right now, with fewer than 90 days remaining before the opening whistle, the promise is unraveling in real time. What is happening instead is something that no one in Washington, no one inside FIFA headquarters, and no one running America's hospitality industry claimed to see coming. Or perhaps they did see it coming and simply refused to accept the implications, because the data is unambiguous, and the data tells a story that should alarm every single person paying attention. International tourism to the United States declined by 5.4% in 2025. Read that again and let it land properly. While the rest of the world collectively saw international travel rise by 4% last year, America moved in the opposite direction. The United States of America, the country that in roughly 3 months is scheduled to host the largest sporting event ever staged on this planet, stands alone as the only major nation on Earth to record a drop in international tourist arrivals. Not stagnation, not a plateau, a documented measurable decline. And the people who have spent their careers analyzing these numbers, the economists, the tourism researchers, the executives running hotel chains and airline networks, they are all arriving at the same conclusion. Some are saying it quietly, in conference rooms and on investor calls. Others are now saying it openly and on the record. The 2026 World Cup may not deliver the economic transformation that was promised. And perhaps the most unsettling dimension of this entire crisis, the piece that genuinely demands public attention right now, is that the fans, the millions upon millions of soccer supporters from around the world, who were supposed to arrive on American shores with their wallets wide open and their enthusiasm fully charged. Many of them simply are not coming. They are redirecting. They are booking trips to Toronto. They are flying to Vancouver. They are landing in Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey. They are choosing Canada. They are choosing Mexico. They are actively selecting the United States co-hosts over the United States itself. And the reasons driving those decisions reach far beyond the boundaries of sport and cut directly to the question of where America stands. In the eyes of the world at this particular moment in history, start with the headline figure because it is the number that makes everything else impossible to ignore. FIFA and the World Trade Organization released a joint analysis projecting that the 2026 World Cup, combined with the Club World Cup, would generate approximately $47 billion in total economic output and contribute $62 billion to global GDP. The United States, by virtue of hosting the overwhelming majority of the matches, was forecast to absorb a $17.2 billion boost to its own GDP, along with the creation of 185,000 jobs. These are not incremental figures. These are numbers that reshape economies, fund municipal infrastructure, and alter the trajectory of communities for a generation. Individual host cities built entire economic strategies around these projections. Atlanta anticipated more than $1 billion from staging 8 matches, including a semifinal. Dallas projected between $400 and $415 million in direct economic impact from 9 matches. Houston was looking at $1.5 billion from 7 matches and associated training facilities. Los Angeles expected nearly $600 million in total regional economic activity. The New York and New Jersey area, home to MetLife Stadium, the venue for the final, projected a $3.3 billion economic impact and planned to welcome 1.2 million visitors. The Boston Consulting Group estimated the entire North American tournament would produce more than $5 billion in short-term economic output, sustaining roughly 40,000 jobs and generating over $1 billion in wages for workers across the host cities. And Airbnb calculated that its hosts operating across the 16 U.S. host cities would collectively earn more than $2.6 billion in revenue during the tournament window alone. These were not back-of-the-envelope guesses. They were constructed on a foundational assumption that international tourists would arrive in massive, sustained waves. And there is a precise economic reason why that assumption mattered so profoundly. A foreign visitor to the United States spends, on average, 4 times more per trip than a domestic traveler. 4 times. Which means that when you subtract international visitors from your attendance equation, you're not simply losing bodies and seats. You are losing the single highest spending, highest impact demographic in your entire audience. And that is precisely the segment that is now turning away. So how did this happen? How does a country go from hosting the most anticipated sporting event in history to a situation where its own tourism industry is openly, publicly questioning whether it can come anywhere close to the numbers it projected? The answer runs through several converging crises, each damaging on its own and collectively devastating in combination. The first, and perhaps most numerically striking, is the near total collapse of Canadian travel to the United States. Canada is not simply one source of international tourists among many. Canada is the single largest source of foreign visitors that the United States receives in any given year. In 2024, Canadian travelers made approximately 20.4 million trips to the United States and spent in the vicinity of $20.5 billion in the process, supporting around 140,000 American jobs. That bilateral relationship is not a footnote. It is the structural backbone of cross-border tourism in North America. In 2025, Canadian travel to the United States fell by approximately 30%. 30. This is not a correction. This is not a soft patch in otherwise healthy data. This is a collapse. Statistics Canada reported that return trips from the U.S. were down more than 26% in October alone, relative to the same month the prior year. The forces driving this collapse are layered and reinforcing. A weakened Canadian dollar made spending in the United States progressively more expensive. Escalating trade tensions and tariff disputes between Ottawa and Washington corroded the broader bilateral relationship. Tightened border enforcement, combined with several widely publicized incidents of travelers being detained or turned away at points of entry, generated genuine documented anxiety among Canadians about crossing south. Travel analysts describe the situation as a perfect storm. Political frustration, economic pressure, and personal apprehension all arriving simultaneously and pointing in the same direction. And this is not an abstraction happening in a spreadsheet somewhere. This is real revenue disappearing from the economies of border states that have historically depended on Canadians crossing over to shop, dine, stay in hotels, and spend money in local communities. When 20 million annual visits contract to somewhere closer to 14 million, the downstream consequences are tangible, immediate, and already being felt from upstate New York to northern Washington. But the decline extends well beyond Canada. Travel from Australia, India, and Western Europe has also contracted. The United States' share of total global international tourism fell from 8.4% in 1996 to just 4.9% by 2024, and declined further still to an estimated 4.8% in 2025. During that same period, arrivals to France, Greece, Mexico, and Italy all increased. The world is not retreating from international travel. Demand for global tourism is robust and growing. People have discretionary income. People want to explore. They are simply directing that desire elsewhere. The CEO of the U.S. Travel Association, speaking at an industry conference in Los Angeles, framed it with rare directness. Domestic travel was essentially flat when corrected for inflation. Inbound international travel was off by more than 5%. And the United States had become the sole major nation on Earth to register a decline in travel arrivals over the preceding year. The CEO of Expedia called the trend concerning. The CEO of Marriott stated publicly that the country needed to make the world feel genuinely welcome. And all of this is unfolding in the 90-day shadow of a World Cup that is nearly upon us. Here is where the story deepens, and where it becomes genuinely alarming for anyone who cares about the economic trajectory of this country. The 2026 World Cup is a shared enterprise across 3 sovereign nations. The United States claims 11 host cities and 78 matches. Canada brings 2 host cities, Toronto and Vancouver, and 13 matches. Mexico contributes 3 host cities, Mexico City, Guadalajara, and Monterrey, and 13 matches. On any conventional analysis, the United States should be winning this competition decisively. It has the most games, the largest venues, the knockout rounds, the semifinals, and the final. But the early behavioral data, the actual booking numbers, the actual ticket sales, the actual accommodation reservations, is narrating a very different story. Reports indicate that U.S. hotel bookings for the World Cup period are lagging behind Canada and Mexico in year-over-year growth rates. Ticket prices for matches staged in the United States are substantially higher than for comparable games in Canadian and Mexican venues. The most affordable tickets for the U.S. tournament opener at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles are priced considerably above what fans would pay to attend opening matches in Mexico City or Toronto. Average group stage ticket prices across U.S. venues are elevated by a meaningful margin. And in a sport where traveling supporters are not merely spectators but active participants in creating the atmosphere that defines the event, price sensitivity matters enormously. When a fan from Germany, Brazil, or Japan is calculating where to spend their money and realizes they can attend a match in Toronto or Monterey for significantly less, with a simpler entry process, with less anxiety about what awaits them at customs, and with the sense that they are traveling to a country genuinely eager to receive them, the calculus is not complicated. The booking data is already reflecting those decisions. And then there is the visa question, which may ultimately represent the most consequential self-inflicted wound in this entire episode. A proposal from U.S. Customs and Border Protection would require travelers from the 42 countries participating in the visa waiver program to submit their social media history from the preceding 5 years as part of the ESTA application process. These are not visitors from nations flagged for security concerns. These are travelers from the United Kingdom, Australia, Japan, South Korea, Qatar, and the bulk of Western Europe, countries that have historically sent some of the most financially robust, most reliable tourists to American shores. Immigration attorneys have flagged that expanded data collection requirements could slow the ESTA processing pipeline and create incentives for travelers to seek less burdensome entry pathways through Canada or Mexico. The privacy implications of surrendering 5 years of social media activity to a foreign government for scrutiny are real and are already influencing the decisions of prospective visitors. Beyond the ESTA proposal, a new visa integrity fee of $250 has been introduced, alongside a separate $100 surcharge on foreign visitors to national parks. Each of these measures, considered alone, might seem like a minor administrative adjustment. Stacked together, they transmit a signal to the international community that is unmistakably clear. Traveling to the United States is becoming harder, more expensive, more invasive, and less welcoming. The international community is receiving that signal and acting accordingly. If you are following this story and you want to understand what happens next as the tournament approaches, make sure you are subscribed with notifications enabled. This situation is evolving rapidly, and the economic consequences for America this summer could be historic. Now consider something that has received almost no mainstream attention, but which carries profound implications that extend beyond economics into the realm of human rights and global sporting legitimacy. Current U.S. entry restrictions bar nationals from several countries, among them Haiti, Iran, Senegal, and Ivory Coast, all of which have qualified for the 2026 World Cup. Think carefully about what that means. There are nations whose football programs have earned the right, through competition, through sacrifice, through years of athletic development, to stand on the world stage at a World Cup. There are fans in those countries who have spent their entire lives dreaming of watching their national team compete. And those fans are legally prohibited from purchasing tickets, boarding planes, clearing customs, and sitting in a stadium in the host country to see their team play. In the full recorded history of the FIFA World Cup, this kind of situation is essentially without precedent. The former FIFA president Sepp Blatter publicly endorsed a proposed boycott of matches staged in the United States. While a formal withdrawal by national football associations remains unlikely given the enormous financial stakes attached to participation, the underlying sentiment powering the boycott movement is authentic and gaining momentum. European football leaders have discussed the possibility openly. Fans across Latin America have voiced profound reluctance about traveling to the U.S. in online communities and on social media. The anecdotal evidence is becoming difficult to dismiss. People who had bought tickets, arranged accommodations, and planned entire travel itineraries around the World Cup have canceled everything. One Canadian supporter described holding tickets to a match in Texas, along with plans to visit family in New Jersey, and walking away from all of it. Latin American fans have shared comparable accounts, expressing that the current environment in the United States makes them deeply uncomfortable about making the journey. The economic math embedded in those individual decisions is quietly devastating. Several U.S. host cities have already moved to scale back or permanently cancel their official FIFA fan festivals. For those unfamiliar with the format, these are large-scale public gathering zones, outdoor viewing areas capable of drawing hundreds of thousands of people who do not hold match tickets but who want to be part of the collective World Cup experience. They are economic engines in their own right, generating substantial spending on food, beverages, accommodation, retail, and entertainment for casual tourists who never enter a stadium. Jersey City, New Jersey, directly adjacent to MetLife Stadium, the venue for the World Cup final, has already canceled its planned fan festival. Other cities have substantially reduced the scale of their originally planned public programming. Remove the fan festivals, and you remove a critical gravitational pull for international visitors who would otherwise choose to base themselves in an American city during the tournament. The match itself becomes the sole attraction, and for many international fans, the full World Cup experience is inseparable from the urban energy surrounding it. The street celebrations, the cultural exchanges, the collective joy of being in a city electrified by the tournament. Strip that away, and you strip away billions in economic activity that host municipalities had already budgeted around. The National Travel and Tourism Office data provides little comfort. Early figures show a nearly 5% decline in global visitation to the United States in January 2026 alone, with current forecasting models suggesting that trajectory could persist through the summer months. The World Travel and Tourism Council conducted a comprehensive cross-national study and confirmed that the United States is the only country among the 184 nations analyzed that is projected to record a contraction in international tourism arrivals. The organization's president and CEO said publicly that the world's largest travel and tourism economy is moving in the wrong direction, not due to insufficient global demand, but due to a failure of deliberate action. While other countries are expanding their welcome, the United States government is, in practical terms, narrowing the gate. Meanwhile, Brand USA, the federally backed destination marketing organization whose explicit function is to promote the United States, it is important to be clear about something here, because intellectual honesty demands it. The 2026 World Cup is going to happen. It is going to be a significant event. Stadium seats will be filled, millions of fans will attend matches, billions of additional viewers will watch the coverage on screens around the world. The economic impact will still be measured in the billions. American host cities will still experience meaningful tourism activity. The question is not whether the tournament will constitute a success in any broadly recognizable sense. The question is whether it will be the once-in-a-generation, record-shattering economic explosion that was promised to American taxpayers, American workers, and American cities. And on that question, the accumulating evidence is increasingly skeptical. The composition of the crowd is shifting toward a predominantly domestic audience, which is valuable for filling seats and generating local spending, but which does not replicate the economic impact of the international visitor who spends at 4 times the domestic rate. The $30 billion figure is being openly questioned by economists who now believe the realized number will fall significantly short once the decline in international arrivals, the cancellation of fan festivals, the scaling back of promotional efforts, and the substantial security and infrastructure costs borne by host municipalities are all properly accounted for. And here's the final dimension of this story, the piece that deserves the most sustained attention. While the United States absorbs these setbacks, Canada and Mexico are quietly, methodically positioning themselves to be the true beneficiaries of this tournament. Toronto and Vancouver are primed to become the sentimental favorites of the 2026 World Cup narrative. Mexico City, one of the most culturally rich, historically layered, and gastronomically celebrated urban centers on Earth, is hosting the very first match of the entire tournament at the legendary Estadio Azteca, a venue that has hosted 2 World Cup finals and contains more football history within its concrete and steel than any American stadium can legitimately claim to rival. Guadalajara and Monterrey offer extraordinary cultural experiences, world-class cuisine, and genuine football atmosphere at a fraction of what a comparable U.S. match day experience will cost. For international fans seeking the full World Cup immersion, without the visa complications, without the border anxiety, without the social media screening requirements, without the sky-high ticket prices, and without the ambient sense that their presence is viewed with suspicion rather than delight, Canada and Mexico are right there, presenting a genuinely compelling alternative. Every dollar an international fan spends in Toronto instead of New York is a dollar that never enters the American economy. Every hotel night booked in Vancouver instead of Seattle is revenue that does not flow to an American business. Every restaurant bill settled in Mexico City instead of Los Angeles represents a transaction that does not create an American job or generate American tax revenue. The economic impact does not vanish. It migrates. It moves north and south of the U.S. border into the accounts of Canada and Mexico. Let this final thought sit with you, because it captures something that transcends economics. The FIFA World Cup is not only a football tournament. It is a global referendum on the character of the host nation. It is the moment when the entire world focuses its attention on a single country and forms a judgment about its values, its priorities, its openness, and whether it is a place the rest of the world wants to visit, invest in, and build a relationship with in the years ahead. The 1994 World Cup in the United States generated more than $1.4 billion for its host cities and fundamentally redirected the arc of American soccer. It led directly to the founding of Major League Soccer. It introduced an entirely new generation of Americans to the sport. It demonstrated to a skeptical global audience that the United States could host football at the highest level. That was the legacy. That is what a single World Cup accomplished for this country 32 years ago. The 2026 tournament, with 48 teams instead of 24, with 104 matches instead of 52, with the world's largest stadiums and the world's largest media market at its disposal, should, by any rational calculation, dwarf the impact of 1994 by an order of magnitude. The physical infrastructure exists. Global demand for the sport exists. The once-in-a-generation opportunity exists. The only open question The question that will define this tournament's legacy long after the final whistle blows at MetLife is whether America is going to seize that opportunity or whether it will stand by while Canada and Mexico quietly claim the windfall that was supposed to belong to the United States. The World Cup begins on June 11th. 90 days remain on the clock. The entire world is watching. And right now, a significant portion of that world has already decided it would rather watch from somewhere other than America. If this breakdown changed the way you're looking at the 2026 World Cup, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to understand what's actually at stake here. Subscribe and turn on notifications. We are going to be tracking every development in this story all the way through to the final. And drop a comment right now. Do you think the United States can turn this around before kickoff, or has the window already closed?